Hello, everyone, and welcome to another awesome adventure on the Marketing Companion. And today we have Sara Wilson with us. Uh, Sara and I just have the best discussions. And if you didn't see this, Sara is actually going to be at my next Uprising event in October in Tennessee. And I mean, the power in this room is going to be just breathtaking. If you haven't checked out the Uprising, check that out on my website. And I'm sure some of the things we're talking about today are going to spill over into some of our conversations at the Uprising as well. So last year, I wrote this book called Belonging to the Brand: Why Community is the Last Great Marketing Strategy. And bizarrely, I haven't really talked too much about this subject over the ensuing months. So we're going to change that today. And I think it's important and timely because I would say I've written two books, maybe three, if you count Known. Known has really been a beloved book about personal branding, but I would say Marketing Rebellion and Belonging to the Brand have kind of become more than books. They've almost become a movement. And the reason I say that is because I know positively that those books have had an impact on the culture of big companies. I get calls from big companies saying, "Hey, read this book. We need to, we need your help. We need to learn more." That is a sign to me that that was the right book at the right time. And Belonging to the Brand really falls into that category. So today with Sara, we're going to look at some of the signals bubbling up from the culture that this idea of community and brand community specifically is gaining strength with big businesses, small businesses, startups, and what's happening with the culture. And the way this topic started with Sara and I is that she made some observations about interesting things happening on the political scene. We are not going to get political today. So, don't get upset. We're not going to be disruptive or polarizing today. That's not what we're about. But we want to look at this from a marketing standpoint. We always want to look at what is going on with the culture that's signaling changes to us about what's going on with marketing. So, Sara, what's going on here today? And specifically, I know you are just immersed in the world of youth culture
Yeah.
like no one else. So, what are you seeing that's interesting to you right now?
Yes. Well, first off, thank you as always for having me, Mark. It's always such a pleasure to be here and hello, everybody. I would say I can't really talk about youth culture or youth trends without talking about the Kamala Harris brat moment that happened late July, so late last month. We can dissect it. I will second this. This isn't about politics, really. This is about analyzing what a really savvy marketing team did to capitalize on an organic community and existing momentum. And so I want to keep that in your head as we go through this conversation, because that's really the common denominator here. So I'm sure your listeners did not miss this, but maybe we do a quick recap in case anyone did.
Yeah, I try
TLD.
to follow along,
Okay.
but obviously I'm interested, but I don't know the term, the brat thing that you mentioned.
Okay. Well, we're
Let's go
gonna get
ahead and
into.
review. Yeah.
Okay, so basically, high level, I'll tell you a little bit about the evolution of this. And by the way, if you want to go deep on this, there's an incredible deep internet researcher, Jules Turpak, who did a fantastic analysis of this, which I
Yeah,
think you know
Jules is
her.
awesome. She's awesome.
Yeah, she's terrific. And she just did analysis. So I'll just tease out what I think is important for marketers. So essentially, back in May 2023, so a while ago in internet years, a clip surfaced of Kamala talking about a quote from her mom where she says, "You think you just fell out of a coconut tree? You exist in the context of all of which came before." So she's talking about this. That clip was surfaced by an account called RNC Research. And that's an account that actually supports Republican causes by kind of clipping Democratic videos to make, Democrats look dumb. Honestly, that's what it is. That does not go viral at the time. It ends up going viral over time. That sound bite becomes a trending sound on TikTok in April 2024 or so. Millions of views under that sound, about 18,000 videos under it. Then in June, Charlie XCX, okay, she's a musician, super popular, has had multiple hits. She's had like a 15-year career. She did not come out of nowhere. There's a specific song on a new album she dropped, which is gaining heat. It's called Apple. In June, there's a TikTok user who overlays the Apple song with the Kamala quote. Now, the way that they did that, it's called an edit. Are you familiar with edits, Mark? What an edit is?
Yes.
Yes?
Look,
Okay,
this
because I really
coconut didn't fall from the tree yesterday.
Okay. An edit is a really interesting evolution that's happened not just in the political landscape, but sort of overall in our consumption landscape. I would say edits are like the evolution of memes. Think of them as like modern day political ads. It's really, really interesting to see how edits have become almost like a central vernacular of definitely this election, but not just politics, for
I
sure.
think, yeah,
So
right,
essentially,
right.
that
Mhm.
quote gets overlaid. That clip goes totally viral. This is June, right? Then it goes viral on Twitter. So you see this evolution. The edits start flying TikTok. This is really a moment, essentially, when we look at this is organic. And again, I really want your listeners to keep that in mind. This spun off hundreds, if not thousands of videos. That was an organic moment. At the same time, there had been growing an absolutely organic fandom around Harris. It's sometimes known as the K Hive. There's this really growing movement of actual people who really love her politics, etc. So you have these two sort of like things happening at the same time: organic fandom and organic virality, I would call it. Then suddenly, when news hit that she would be running for president, Charlie XCX, it seems that it was organic. She tweeted, Kamala is Brad. Now, Brad is the name of Charlie XCX's album that has gained so much heat that Apple is on. So all of a sudden, it was this massive collision of organic factors. And then you had Charlie XCX kind of blessing this moment. Now, what did Kamala's team do in response? They capitalized on that moment. They capitalized on that organic buzz. They started a TikTok for Kamala herself, so her POV, sort of her personality. And most notably, they changed the banner on their Twitter to this sort of iconic green to mirror the Brat album cover. We'll talk about the outcome, but I want to pause there because I know that's a lot for listeners, but really that's the evolution of
Yeah,
what happened. Again, organic capitalization. And that's what I want you to take through.
yeah. Well, it's a very, very interesting idea because, and this is something I've been thinking about a lot. So I attended a presentation with an executive from TikTok,
Yep.
an agency, and I think maybe there was a brand there or something. And the big theme was that content today is about reassembling,
Yep.
right? It's about the edit. It's about having content being remixed and
Yep.
re-engineered in different ways. And they gave an example in the session where I believe it was General Motors. I believe it was General Motors, their truck division. So there was some TikTok meme where
Yep.
this woman had like a funny hiccup, and the hiccup
Okay.
sound went viral. And so General Motors had their truck going over a speed bump, and it went over the speed bump. It made that hiccup sound. So that would be an
Oh, perfect.
example. That would
Yeah.
be an example of. So I have not gotten that out of my mind because I think it's very true. But what is sort of at odds with me or perplexing to me is, okay, that's cool
Yeah.
if somehow that becomes organic and people reassemble your content for you. But like, what's the brand leadership role in something
Yes.
like that.
So let me first just quickly talk about what's the outcome. What was the outcome
Yeah.
of this kind of in the real world? Because I think it's easy to go, oh, look, this is cool. It got news coverage, but like what actually happened? So I think what is notable is that not only did Kamala's accounts get millions of new social followers across different platforms, she raised a lot of money like in the real world. I think she raised $81 million in the first 24 hours. Now, is that all caused by what I just described? Heck no. But that is the highest 24-hour fundraising haul like for any presidential candidate in history. The other thing is that it's more than what Taylor Swift got to register for voters when Taylor basically did a get out the vote. There were 40,000 new voter registrations in kind of the 24 hours after she announced. 83% of that were young voters, 18 to 34. That's significant. So we can't just think of this as a social trend. So I just want to sort of put a pin in that. There are risks to a brand embracing this kind of organic, voter-driven, user-driven traction. And I think they kind of walked that line here. So absolutely there are risks. What is the brand lesson here? So let's move to that because it was a great question. I think it's really about leveraging existing organic conversation and or existing community and pulling that momentum back into your own orbit. And I think the more robust the community, the more powerful the impact can be for a brand, specifically in the realms of attention, relevance and loyalty. Those are sort of the three things I see this working for. So I look at, there's an equation that I kind of look at, and I can detail that. It's at three parts. It's define an organic community where your audience already is. So this is what a brand would need to do. Show up consistently inside the community in 4 key brand aligned ways, and we'll walk through those. And then provide multiple opportunities for participation, to your point about participatory remix. So if you can do those 3 things, you can really nail what I see is that, essentially what that formula was that Kamala was able to do. And I actually saw this last week happen with Wendy's. Wendy's, a big, big brand. We obviously all know Wendy's, partnered with a small community-driven brand called Lonely Ghost. Most people had never heard of them, but they're cool. And they've created a really, genuine, small grassroots community. It's a creator-led brand. And they were essentially anointed with the cool of Lonely Ghost that they did not have necessarily before. And so it's really smart. It's a smart strategy.
Yeah, I think you bring up some really, really, really good points and observations that I want to build on. But first, I want to remind everyone that our show is brought to you by Brevo. Brevo is just awesome in this sort of turbulent marketing world. They can help you make your customer relationships matter, engage new audiences, just like we're talking about today, while cultivating existing connections. And they're so cool. They're great to work with. Very easy to use. You can get started with Brevo for free by going to brevo.com/marketing companion. You can try it for free. It's awesome. And if you want to sign up for the paid version, be sure to use the promo code companion to get 50% off. Now, I love this idea of what Wendy's did with Lonely Ghost. And it's interesting because this is, I got a blog post actually I'm working on this exact topic, really saying that you've got to start big brands. So you look at one of the trends noted in my book is that this is the default for small companies today.
Yes, that's a great point. Yeah.
80% of startups begin with community as their major marketing effort.
Is that so?
It
That's
is so.
fascinating.
And
I
it's
need you
not
to
at
send me that.
80,
I want to.
80%. And it's not just tech. One of the brands that I've studied that's not in the book is a new sort of healthful drink brand called Gorgie. And when you go into onto their website, the first thing they say is join our community, be part of this. This is built with you. It's, you are part of this. And so this is where, especially I think There's a lot of energy from youth culture here. And think about it. If you're a new business, you need advocates, you need feedback, you might even need funding. And so why wouldn't it make all the sense in the world to start with community? I believe the number is something like 80% of startups start with community as their marketing strategy. And of that 80%, I believe it's over 70% say the community strategy is the number one success factor if we're going to make it or not. It's not the product, it's not the money. It's like we've got to have this community in place to help us succeed. So, so I think, look, it's already part of the small startup, the small business startup kind of culture. And so one of the things I've been thinking about a lot, and you and I have talked about it a little bit, is okay, now you're a big brand. I love
Yeah.
what Wendy's did, and here's why. Because here's what I see happening with the big brands. This is where they're struggling. They're saying, okay, we want to be involved with these communities. And the mindset is any significant brand activity goes to the advertising agency.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so the question is, how does a brand show up in a community? And my answer is,
Mhm.
you don't. It's a,
Disagree.
it has to,
Disagree.
no,
Okay.
no,
So this
no,
is,
no,
yeah.
just what,
Oh, okay.
hear me out.
Okay. Okay.
Hear me out.
Yes.
A person has to show up in a community.
Mm.
Nobody cares about the brand. It's about it's this human being. So and they're saying you mean like I work for this company and I'm the one that has to be in this community? I said, yeah, you do. So you
Yeah. Let's unpack that. So
maybe
I
you disagree, maybe you don't, but
No, I would say I agree, and I
yeah.
think there's also another way to do it. So I absolutely think that influencers, or influencers that the brand is working with slash creators, or people from within the company that are like the influencer faces of that brand, are the most powerful advocates for that brand. That is true. And to show up within a community, having a face, absolutely powerful. But I would also say I've seen time and time again where that's not done, and it can be equally powerful. So I'll give two examples that I love from, I think, the past few months. The first is McDonald's. So McDonald's, one of the biggest brands in the world. I know we're talking a lot of fast food here, but let's just be honest, it's working. So McDonald's identified that there was a conversation happening in the anime community, um, involving something that was called WickDonald's. I'm not sure if we've talked about this before, but essentially it's a play on McDonald's and sort of a riff on that. It was already getting an organic conversation within that sort of manga anime community. And so they essentially picked up on that via social listening and spun it out into a 360 creative partnership that's not requiring a person from McDonald's or an influencer to show up in that community. What it was a clever creative activation that integrated things like menu items, events. It did have influencers, but it wasn't just like that was the only thing leading it. So I would say if you can really identify a community where that organic conversation is happening and tap into it in really brand aligned ways that speak the language of the community, you don't necessarily need to have that influencer. The one other example I will give, and then we can talk about this, is the book talk slash Mew Mew activation this summer. I don't know if you were aware of this, but there's a huge movement on TikTok. It's called Book Talk. It's absolutely expanded past TikTok. It's not just a hashtag. It's really kind of a moment, a movement. I would say it's a pretty robust community embracing all things books. Mew Mew saw that, went, okay, that's our audience. That community reflects who our audience is, who we want to get in front of. And they created these incredible pop-ups in different cities across, I think it was Europe and the US. And it was essentially a book talk slash Mew Mew moment that generated a ton of organic traction and reverse engineered attention via press, UGC, lines around the block. They had these really cute sort of Instagrammy pop-ups. Like that was essentially what I'm talking about, that integration and that collaboration with the community. And in that case, there wasn't like a one influencer that they needed to make that happen. So I'll pause there because I know that's a lot.
Yes, it was a lot. uh, the thing I like about the McDonald's example is somehow, and by the way, I mean, I think McDonald's is just doing amazing things with
They
their
really
marketing.
are.
The thing that sort of threw me for a loop is that their quarterly numbers have been down. I mean,
They've been, oh, interesting.
yeah, McDonald's is not doing real well financially right now. So as much as I'm admiring their marketing, I think they're going to have to reassess kind of what's going on. Yeah, they're kind of getting a hit by Wall Street right now. But I think McDonald's has been singularly impressive in terms of how they really are part of the culture.
Culture, yeah.
And I love that example where that they're offering their their menu and the icons of the brand up for remixing.
Yeah.
So I think that's fascinating. Um, the book talk thing, I'm not sure how much that is. Well, it's tapping into a meme. It's tapping into a conversation. It's tapping in. It's kind of making a hashtag, come alive. Uh, yeah, but yeah, they're sort of like they're capitalizing on the hashtag and the conversations through live events. Do I have that right?
Yes, but I would say that book talk is definitely more than a hashtag. I mean, we
Yeah.
see already a ton of organic events, momentum around book talk. I mean, there was a really interesting event. I'm blanking on the name, but happened in New York. That was just, people were invited to come and read together. It wasn't a brand event. It was just something that spun off this sort of organic power around unplugging and reading. There's also a massive resurgence of Kindles happening where Kindles are being embraced. So really certain brands are being brought into the fold by this community. I believe it's bigger than just a hashtag. And I know we have talked about this before. I've seen how it's come to life in different ways. And so I think what Miu Miu did, they have this authentic connection to books. They have the summer reads, program already. It's not something that came out of nowhere. So they have a lot of integrity in that space. And they basically just took it to the next level by partnering with really like inserting themselves into an existing organic conversation that I would say it's a community, but we can, go back and forth between the semantics. But I really do believe that it's about inserting yourself into that existing organic conversation or existing organic community, because I do think it's very hard for larger brands to just create this from scratch.
Yeah.
So let's identify kind of like what are the moving trains that reflect where our audience already is. That's kind of my whole approach.
Yeah. And you and I don't necessarily agree with the definition of
Yeah,
community.
and that's
I mean,
okay.
but
Yeah.
here's the simplest line I heard.
Uh-huh.
So someone said, okay, this is a community. If someone in my community makes me laugh, can I make them laugh back?
Mm.
Okay, so I think that's a great idea because so if McDonald's does something out there and they're creating conversations, if someone makes McDonald's laugh, well, they know that a person at McDonald's laughed. So anyway, so this is really interesting. So this is a theoretical question,
Yeah.
highly theoretical, really reaching through my imagination here.
Okay.
Say someone was, oh, I don't know, writing a new book. They're publishing a new book. Like, how would you become part of the book talk community? I
Yeah.
mean, is it sort of you've got to be there always, or do you just show up and say, well, I'm here now and
No,
let's
I
have
think you
fun?
need, okay, so as a creator, which you are, Mark, as a creator who is
Mm,
publishing a new book, I would want to start getting your face and talking sort of on ideally TikTok, but you can, use the TikTok editing tools and then post to LinkedIn, which is your primary platform, I would say getting on your, as a person, your
Mhm.
personality. Because I
Yeah.
think we hear you through your podcast, people know you through your writing, but I think you want to introduce people to who you are and a little bit of a, one-to-one relationship. So as a creator, I would say who's putting out a book, that is the way to do it. Put yourself on more, develop a presence as a person. As
Yeah.
a brand, getting involved, I would say, remember I mentioned earlier, like creative activations along 4 different quadrants, like showing up consistently inside the community in 4 ways. So the 4 ways that I talk about are, okay, identify that community, book talk, partnerships, IRL moments, creators, and content. So if you can come up with creative activations on those 4, in those 4 areas, that is going to put you in a really smart position because you're going to be showing up consistently to that community and you're going to show them that you're there for more than just a one-off. And I think that's very important, providing opportunities for participation within that and showing them that, look, you're here for the long haul. That is essentially a version of what McDonald's did, what Miu Miu did, and what many other brands have done. So, but I would say as a creator who's releasing a book, like you don't need to do all 4 things. I would say just put your face out there and start talking about what is this book about? Teaching marketing lessons, figuring out what are the people who you speak to need to know. You can distill all your other content down to that.
Mhm. So no dancing?
You definitely don't need to.
I could.
But of course, Mark, if you want
I
to
could.
do the Charlie XCX Apple, it would be very, hilarious. So
Well, yeah, it gets down to this. How do I become Brat? I mean, that is basically my personal and professional goal for 2025.
basically you just have to not I can't say this on your podcast, but like GAF and just like roll through summer, like
Yeah.
have a very laissez-faire mentality. I don't see you doing that.
I'm always pushing boundaries. I could be the first silver-haired person that's Brat. I mean,
Yeah.
that would be
Yeah.
kind of cool,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, to be honest, I think the moment, it's not to say it's past, but it's like this was such a frenzy. And I believe it might have hit its peak when Kamala changed that profile. So I really think the campaign needs to be very, very careful of over indexing on
Yeah.
trends,
Right.
because it
Right.
absolutely could backfire. And really,
Yeah.
now's the time to lean into policy, more serious topics, definitely personality, but not just leaning into trends.
Yeah, and I think, you know, there's just a huge lesson. And this is something that you were quoted on in my Belonging to the Brand book. And this was one of the most interesting and boldest quotes probably
Hmm.
in any of my books. And I think you kind of said this as a moment of exasperation, but I'm so glad you let me keep it in the book because you said maybe it's time to turn to the youngest person in your marketing department and put them in charge of this. And I think that's one of the lessons is that if you try too hard to index to these things, you're just going to become foolish because there is a
Yeah.
culture, there is a language, there is a tone that fits. And
Yeah.
if you try too hard to be part of that, so yeah, so I mean, whether you're in politics or whether you're in business or whether it's a nonprofit, I think this idea of being culturally relevant is
Yeah.
it's more important than ever.
It absolutely is. And I'm seeing it over and over again. It's the thing that cuts through. It
Yeah,
cuts through the noise in such a deep way. And the fact is that culture is subcultures. So that is why I constantly talk about niche marketing, figuring out, who you're for and really diving into that. You brought up Yeti to me. I think Yeti is a really interesting example of a brand that's absolutely done that. Yesterday I actually went to the US Open of Surfing here in California in Huntington Beach. And who was on the beach as a huge, like absolutely chic lounge area? Yeti.
yeah,
And why are they there? Like, why is Yeti at a surfing event? Well, because one of their primary, focus areas and what they look at is surfing. Another one is spearfishing. Like, there's not a lot of spearfishers Presumably it's not a massive driver for them, but when I was chatting, with them, I learned that, and it's like, oh, that's super interesting. That's because these very focused areas are extremely fruitful for brands if they
Well,
can embed
yeah,
themselves.
I mean, and that's why Yeti is like my superstar
Yeah,
in terms of community, brand community, uh, their initiatives. And
absolutely.
the last I saw, they have 15 distinct communities.
Mm,
And I think it's notable that the first 5 years of that brand, they had no advertising whatsoever.
mhm.
And like one of their communities now is focused on getting like underprivileged, economically disadvantaged people out into the woods,
Nature.
right?
Yeah.
Now, does that help the brand? Yes. Does that help the world? Yes. So the key to community for me is that intersection of purpose. When the
Mhm.
purpose of the brand intersects with society in some way. Another community they have is mapping unmapped trails,
Yeah.
right?
Very interesting.
So cool, right?
Yeah.
Now, their newest community, it'll be interesting to see. Maybe they've created one about surfing. It makes all the sense. But of course, they've got one on the obvious ones, hunting and fishing, but different outdoors, camping. But
Mhm.
the one that was a little surprising to me, and I think this was their newest one, was rodeo.
Interesting.
Isn't that
Interesting.
interesting? Yeah, they've
Yeah.
created a rodeo community. So
Yeah.
obviously the marketers there sensed some kind of
Yeah.
momentum between their brand purpose and what's going
Right.
on with rodeo.
Yeah,
And
that's super
but
interesting. They're
isn't it
embedding themselves in different niche communities that, by the way, aren't so niche. I mean, rodeo is massive. Like when you look at
right?
who are you hitting, it's deep engagement. I want to just call out something you said that was super interesting that I think gets overlooked. Brand purpose. None of this works, none of it, without having a really clear POV as to who you are as a brand
Mhm.
and making that sort of doing that work first. What is the brand about? Is what is the belief? What's the belief
Yeah,
system? What's the transformation you're going to offer? Who are you for? And what's the core value you offer emotionally? Doing that work and figuring that out is essential to all of this because if you show up in a community, surfing, fishing, camping, whatever, and you don't have that, no one's going to care. They're not going to be able to see themselves in you. So it's
yeah.
going to be wasted. So that's how I always think about it. It's very essential.
Well, 100%. I mean, that's exactly what I teach in the book and in my
Yeah.
speeches and in my workshops. That I think the two most essential things from a business perspective
Hmm.
is number one, the culture, because creating a brand community, it's different than advertising. It's a
Yeah.
commitment up and down the company, and it
Yeah.
becomes like a social contract, which we don't think about marketing in that way. Traditional marketing is you get, the money approved for an ad, you get the,
Yes.
legal to approve the creative, and then when the money runs out, then the ad goes away. But a community, if you get people involved in a community, it becomes like this social contract that can't go away. Not to
Yeah.
saying, not to say you can't pilot something or try something and make it clear to people, we're trying this out. That's perfectly fine. But once you commit, it doesn't really go away. So supporting the culture of the company and then, brand purpose. It's got to be
Yeah.
something other than we want to sell something to a new demographic. It's got to
I
be, what,
completely agree.
how,
Yeah.
how do we grow? How does this brand have a bigger impact on the world if our customers come alongside us? And for the
Yeah.
customers, how do we learn something new? How do we change something? How do we move something? Because
Yeah.
we can partner with this brand and we can do this better than doing it, on our own.
It's
So
absolutely true. I
yeah,
mean, I can't say it enough. So plus one to that.
yeah,
I really just think all of this is a shift. It's a mindset
It
shift. And so even
is.
when I say, you got to get the youngest person at your company, like that could seem kind of ageist. What I mean is like
Yeah.
there is a real value in people who are close to culture. And most of the time that's going to be young people. However, it doesn't work unless you have an apparatus around that person with legal and with, support at the top to really go, this is valuable. This is
Yeah.
important. And so I would say it is a culture question for sure.
Well, I think this is ending the show with a +1 to Mark. That's a good way to end the
Love
show.
it.
So great
Also, a
conversation.
reminder that you're going to get your face out there prepping for your book release, right? This is what
Well, yeah, well, that's another conversation. I've got to do something about my face first, perhaps. Yeah, that's why I'm a blogger. Uh,
I get it.
thanks so much, everyone, for joining us today. We never ever take you for granted. And look, our audience continues to grow. If you haven't left us a review on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts, I'd encourage you to do that. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next time on the Marketing Companion.